Hey everyone, it's Lori, and I'm here today with a homeschool wrap up for the 2018-2019 school year. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what my plan was for the 2018-2019 school year, and then we're going to go over what worked and what didn't work and what changed. So, this is what I do every year. I'm going to try to put it close so you can see. So, I've got each girl, and each girl gets a chart thingy. A chart. I don't know what these are called. I don't have words today. And it breaks down into 6 terms. So we do 6 terms of 6 weeks. So what I needed to know this year for the terms was that term 3 was short because we had a trip to Rome. So I didn't have a full 6 weeks there. Although we did do school in Rome in terms of we did a lot of history and architecture type things while we were there, and those counted as school hours because I'm a homeschooler. So our vacations always have school days. So we'll start with Charlotte, the younger of the two, and then move to Eva. I have a bad habit of over planning because I want to teach my kids everything under the sun as quickly as possible because that's my temperament. So generally speaking, the plan is usually bigger than what actually gets done. So that's my little caveat. So Charlotte, this year did 6th/7th grade. She asked if she could skip a grade, and I told her she could if she got through 2 math programs. So she actually started the 7th grade math program, which is through teaching textbooks, and we usually do that in 6th grade. That's just how we do things. A lot of people actually use teaching textbooks a year earlier than the grade level, but I digress. Okay, so she had to go through 2 math programs. So she had teaching textbook 7 and teaching textbooks pre-algebra. Now she is still working a little bit this summer to finish up the pre-algebra, but she is most of the way through that class. So that was a success. Math was good. For writing, we did a writing co-op. This is the first time I've done a really academic co-op that met on a weekly basis. It was a little stressful. It was 45 minutes to an hour of driving each way every Wednesday, and every snowfall all year fell on a Wednesday. I wish I were joking, but I really feel like every time it snowed, it was going to be a Wednesday. That made that difficult. But Charlotte did Institute for Excellence in Writing class, the Student Intensive Continuation Course Level B. I was not in her classroom. I was not her teacher. So she was experiencing having other people teach and grade her for one of the first times. So that went on all year long, and she did relatively well. I feel like she could have applied herself more and that her teachers could have challenged her more, and she feels that way too. She is an extremely advanced thinker, way, way above grade level. Like, she's the smartest person in the house. It's kind of disturbing. But since she's such a high level thinker, she can be really lazy and get away with it. The next thing I had on her thing was she wanted to learn the flute. We bought a flute. This crashed and burned. We had a similar experience when Eva wanted to learn the violin a year or 2 ago. We even did some private lessons, and that also crashed and burned. So apparently, music is not a great subject in this house. They both take piano lessons, and they both sing, but like, learning instruments has not gone as expected, and me being like the world's biggest band nerd in school, that kind of hurts. But so flute, crash and burn, that was off the list in that first 6 weeks, I think. And then the next thing I have is that the first 2 terms she was going to do a class through Homeschool Connections on Greek history. And she did do that one. She enjoyed that class a lot. I think it was with Philip Campbell, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, she liked the Greek history. And at the same time she was doing that, she was going to do a Greek myths class. Now, this Greek myths class was also through Homeschool Connections. And she did about 2 classes and then just came to me with 10 million complaints and fact checking the instructor and saying she got this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. I don't know if the poor woman got them wrong or not, because I am not a huge Greek myths nerd, but Charlotte is. So I knew this was not going to work out, that her temperament and this instructor was going to be bad. So we ended up moving her into another Homeschool Connections class. So the class that Charlotte moved up to was a high school level class called Mythology and Literature. And this was taught by Kevin O'Brien, who both of my girls have taken a live class with. He is an actor, and he's a very interesting teacher, but he doesn't really stick to his syllabus very well, so that always tends to be a little bit of a struggle. So she very much enjoyed that class more, and so that was a good switch to a high school class from a middle school level class. The beginning of the year, she did a short study skills class. I think she could revisit it because her note taking and such is still atrocious. And then she did a live class on playwriting with Kevin O'Brien through Homeschool Connections. She loved that class. That was probably one of the best things she did all year. She is my little theater nerd, so she had a great time with that. Okay, so moving into the next 2 terms, during the 3rd and 4th term, she was doing a history of scientific thought, also Homeschool Connections class. I believe this one was Macbeth Durham. And my girls aren't super sciencey, so this is kind of a history of science, so it's kind of cheating because it's like history but science. So she did that one. I don't think she loved it, but I haven't found a science class that Charlotte really loved other than when we did one on the planets. She does like astronomy a lot. And then she was going to move into Roman history, and so she did do a Roman history class. I believe that one was also with Philip Campbell, and her history classes went well. And then the original plan was for her to do American Sign Language, and that just never happened. I think she decided she just wasn't interested at all, which is okay. And then we also had the flute failure, so we had to fill some stuff in. One of the things we filled in with was the story of the Bible. This is another Homeschool Connections class. You'll notice the theme here. We used a lot of Homeschool Connections recorded classes this year. And this one was going through Bible history using kind of the Bible timeline method where you've got the different time periods. I think Jeff Cavins created the program. I've gone through the adult program. We've done the kids program before, so this was just another kind of iteration of that. So lots of Bible reading and lots of just listening to lectures and some quizzes. So that one was a good fit for her. And we also added in Introduction to Formal Logic because it was a class that I had been meaning for her to do this next year, but she wasn't really feeling inspired by a lot of things. So she agreed to Introduction to Formal Logic and found out that she hates formal logic, which is okay. She's done it now. She has a basic foundation in logic, and that's all I can ask for. Eva enjoyed this class a lot more than she did. I believe Introduction to Formal Logic was also Philip Campbell. So Charlotte's education this year was brought to you by Philip Campbell and Kevin O'Brien. But that's okay. That's pretty much her favorite 2 teachers on Homeschool Connections. Okay. And then terms 5 and 6, we had been planning to do a Shakespeare class. Charlotte's kind of a Shakespeare buff, so we were going to do a high school level one with both girls. And then we were going to do a class on saints. And then Charlotte was going to finish up sign language and do some PE. PE also really didn't happen for that child. And we didn't do the Shakespeare, and we didn't do the saints. But she had already had quite a few classes because, of course, I'm an overplanner. The the one more class we added in, because we didn't do the Shakespeare, Charlotte wanted another literature class. So she did a Mastery of Mysteries, which was another Homeschool Connections class with Kevin O'Brien. And they read a bunch of mysteries, and she ended up writing her own mystery play as her final project. So this year had a lot of theater for Charlotte. She also did a play towards the end of the school year. So what are we at? Like maybe 50% of my plan worked, which is probably about normal for me for Charlotte. So that was Charlotte's 6th/7th grade year. And Eva, I had other plans for, and I think overall her plans stayed a little more consistent than Charlotte. Eva's much more willing to stick something out if she's not enjoying it, and Charlotte's much more likely to kind of have a temper tantrum until I change things up. So, plus Eva's also doing high school. This was her freshman year of high school. It was a hard transition for us, and I did discover that I had planned too many online type classes, recorded classes, and computer-based things. So we had to cut back on that. So our plan for Eva for terms 1 and 2, well, actually for the entire year, she was going to do a lot of this stuff, actually. She was going to do teaching textbooks geometry. She is still trying to finish that. It is the shortest of the upper level math programs, but those proofs have made it very difficult. So she was not able to do even close to a lesson a day. I don't know why that is. It's been a struggle all year long. I am looking forward to her finally being done with geometry. She also did a biology class, and that was also through Homeschool Connections. It was a recorded class. I cannot remember who the instructor was, but it did have a lab component, so that lasted the entire school year, and she did, I believe, 6 dissections. I brought my mother, who was a high school biology teacher professionally for a really, really long time, in to do the labs with her so that I didn't have to do them. So I think she finished every single thing in the class except perhaps reading the very last chapter of the book. So if she gets that or doesn't get to that, I don't really care that much. I don't remember finishing very many textbooks in school, so don't tell her, but I'm okay if she doesn't do that. Next up, we had Spanish. She did a year's worth of Spanish. And this was also a Homeschool Connections recorded class. And I think this one was pretty good. She had a little bit of difficulty with the instructor, and the instructor's way of handling the technology was not really my preference. She liked to use PowerPoints with embedded sound in them, which meant that we had to get Microsoft Word, which we had never had before, or Microsoft Office or whatever it's called, which we had not had before, in order for her to use the PowerPoints properly. So it was just a little bit of a nuisance. But I think overall it was a relatively good class. She's going to continue on to Spanish 2 next year. And then for writing, we did the co-op. So writing co-op, I was one of her teachers. We did 2 programs from IEW, the Institute for Excellence in Writing. We did the Elegant Essay and Writing Research Papers. And I think that was a really good experience. We're going to continue with the co-op next year, mostly because of the good experience with the high school class. It was stressful, but I felt like it was a good experience overall. I don't know if I'm going to do it long term, but we have committed to another year of that. So beyond that, I had kind of some classes. Those were all year-long classes. Then I had some things that weren't supposed to go year-long. Some of them did. So the first one was a computer science class, Introduction to Computer Science, and the professor was Dr. Peggy Morrow, and it was a recorded class. Now, this class was supposed to be a semester long, so half a year, and you were supposed to have 2 classes a week, and that turned out to be way too much stress on Eva. She's just a little bit of a perfectionist. And she wanted all of her projects to be perfect. And so she spent probably 5 times more time than necessary on all of the assignments, because a lot of times it would be like, you can either modify this thing that I give to you, or you can create your own thing from scratch. So what did Eva choose? Doing it from scratch. So rather than being a semester, she did so much work, it turned into a year-long course. She put in the hours. I'm calling it a full credit of computer science. There's also a very short Homeschool Connections class, I believe it was with Philip Campbell, on Christian architecture. And so we had Eva do that kind of surrounding our trip to Rome, and she's still working on her final project, which I gave her to make it a half a credit worth of work, of a PowerPoint showing some of the architectural features in the churches we saw in Rome. So, again, with the perfectionist thing, she does need to get that done. The biology chapter, maybe not, but that one I want to see. And then she was supposed to do a government class on Homeschool Connections, and about the time that we were supposed to start this, we were still struggling through this computer. Oh, we had another one. So we had a history of musical theater that we were going to do as a family, and we watched a couple of those, and it just it was too much, so we just let that one slide. We may come back to it. It was fun, but we just didn't have the time. High school was harder than I thought it was going to be. So about the time we had our Rome trip and all of this stuff, and we were moving into new classes, was high school swim season. So that was something I did schedule in for terms 3 and 4, kind of saying, we're going to have to go a little lighter here because Eva's going to be doing a sport. And that did take up a lot of life. And then we had a lot of things that didn't quite get all the way accomplished, so the computer science ended up being a year long. So something had to give. So the things that she was supposed to do that kind of got revamped midway through the year, she was going to do a government class on Homeschool Connections, but she just had so many recorded classes in computer-based math and everything, she couldn't handle it. So we needed to come up with some things that weren't in front of the computer. So we dropped that government class. We were going to do that Shakespeare class with Charlotte. We dropped that class. And we were going to do the Saints class, and we dropped that class. So there's 3 things that just I scratched out. Those were all recorded classes. I found out that our limit for things being on the internet or on the computer in some way is 4 classes. We can't do more than 4 at a time. It just is too much. So, what we ended up doing instead for government is I ended up getting a Barron's book, and it was called Painless American Government, and it had a bunch of chapters and little quizzes in it, and then some project ideas. So she needed to do the quizzes and self-grade them and pick a project from each chapter to do. And then to that, we added in she needed to read a classic work of government. And in the end, we ended up going with not quite a classic, because we decided that her second research paper for writing research papers was going to have to be on a topic in American government. And she picked the Electoral College. And so one of the things that she wanted to kind of use for her arguments dealing with the Electoral College is the Federalist Papers. But those can be pretty tricky, so we ended up getting a book called The Accessible Federalist, and so that was kind of like her government extra work to read. And then she did her research paper. So that ended up being her 1 semester's worth of government. And then we really didn't have any literature for her all year long in terms of like a class, because we had been planning on Shakespeare. So we ended up kind of creating a class using some books that we read, and assigning her a few more things to get a half a credit of literature, because she had a full credit of writing. We just didn't really have any literature. And so we ended up coming up with a class on the children of World War II. So she read several narratives that involved child protagonists' experience in the Second World War. So she's very much into war, so that one was a good way to do it. She is still reading one of those works. She is working on the Diary of Anne Frank. I think this morning she said she had about 70 pages left, so hopefully she'll finish in the next day or two and finish up her little project to go with that and be done with that as well. So that is my not so short wrap up of our 2018-2019 school year, what I planned, what worked, what didn't work, what we changed. Hopefully in the next month or two, I will be able to come with my plan for 2019-2020, and then we can, go back at the end of the year and laugh at the things I planned that didn't work out quite as I planned. But anyway, if you enjoy homeschool content, please give this video a thumbs up so I know that people are interested in more homeschooling stuff. If you have any comments on homeschooling in general, or how your homeschool year went, or things you think I'm forgetting, because there's a possibility I'm forgetting important things in my kids' education. They're going to have some gaps, but that happens. You can leave me a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss a video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.